So let's get some analysis on the meeting that was on Friday, and then, of course, what's expected to take place tomorrow. And for that, we are joined by international relations expert Dr. Oscar Van Heerden, joining us via video link. Doc, thank you so much for joining us. Before we get into what we're expecting to see in the Oval Office tomorrow, which is going to be quite a moment, I anticipate, but let's start off with what we saw on Friday. Putin and Trump having a discussion, and we hear Trump in that clip saying, we haven't been able to get there, but we can get there. He's asked Trump, he's asked Putin rather for, an end to the war. But you've got European backers that are saying, no, we need a final, I've called for a ceasefire rather instead of a final settlement. I don't know what you make of whether or not Trump on Friday had any success in his talk with Putin.
Good evening, Naledi, and to the viewers. I think it is safe to say that the big winner from Alaska was the battlefield realities. Because of the realities on the battlefield, that is what dictated the mood in Alaska. Putin was in no mood to do any concessions because Russia is winning on the battlefield. And so you are right. The two big issues here was ceasefire versus a peace agreement. And Putin making it very clear. Because we are winning on the battlefield, we are not interested in a ceasefire. Because a ceasefire is going to mean that the Ukrainian forces can regroup. At the moment, they are falling apart in Petrovsk, in Sumy region, in Kharkiv, etc. In one single day, the Russian forces were able to cover a distance of approximately 11 kilometers, which is huge. And all predictions by various international pundits are that at this current pace, the Ukrainians' defenses will fall apart. And this is why Russia is not interested in a ceasefire, because a ceasefire is going to give everyone a moment of pause. The forces of the Ukrainians can regroup. They can get in more weapons from the Europeans and the Americans and, have a fresh assault whenever the ceasefire is over. And therefore, Russia is not interested. Russia said to President Trump, we want a lasting peace agreement. We want the war to end. So the one thing that came out of this summit, I think as a big positive, is for the first time, the president of Russia and the president of the United States sharing one platform, getting a clear international commitment that both parties want the war to end. The disagreement is how that should happen.
And that will take center stage, of course, tomorrow. Now, we have to talk about the significance of this moment of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky heading back to Washington. He'll be in that Oval Office tomorrow, but this time, not alone. This time, he'll be flanked by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. You've got the French President Emmanuel Macron, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. I mean, the list goes on, and I actually want to go through it because it's extensive, right? German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, and then Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, and Finnish President Alexander Stubb. That is quite a team that he's walking into that office with. The significance of that, Dr. Van Heerden?
A massive team, and all I want to say is that all these countries that you have mentioned now, Naledi, are already fighting against Russia and has been for the last 3 years. I think this is a very, very important point. The Europeans and Zelensky talk as if they can do so much more to push Russia back, to keep the line. They have been trying to do that for the last 3 years, and they have not been successful. So, what's going to happen is they're going to come, they're going to try and convince Trump that he must not be influenced by Putin, by the evil Putin, that Putin has got these imperial ambitions, that this is only the start of the expansion, and that we cannot allow him to get away with taking the Donbas regions. We need to have serious red lines and so forth. They are arguing and they are talking as if they are in a position of strength, and none of them are. And I think this is what Trump has realized for this summit in Alaska. Putin made it very clear. If Trump had any maneuvers, if he could push anything, You know, the interesting thing about negotiations and strategy is that Putin is not interested in a ceasefire. He's not compromising on that one. He sticks to the core three demands. And also, importantly, he doesn't even mention sanctions. He doesn't talk about, I want you to drop the sanctions. I want our foreign reserves to be returned. No. And he's trying to send an indirect message that we have already given up on those things. We are moving on. So if you talk of more sanctions, bring it on.
Sure. Interesting that your perspective is this team that Zelensky walks into the Oval Office in tomorrow, perhaps Trump having seen that they don't necessarily have all that much power. Because then I was going to ask the sort of tact that they need to have. I mean, if you go back to our very own meeting with President Cyril Ramaphosa and our team in the Oval Office, one would argue that there was some sort of, perhaps planning as to this is how we're going to tackle this. This is why we need business. This is why we need, the representative of GNU, and the list can go on. But what tact, strategy these leaders need to walk into that office with, especially when you go back to that shambolic meeting with Trump and Zelensky, and also the U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, who reports are he will also be in the room.
Well, if I was President Zelensky, forget the bravado and trying to put up the strong face and arrogance and so forth. What I would ask the Americans and the Europeans in the meeting tomorrow, can you give me guarantees that Russia is not going to take over the whole of the Ukraine within the coming months? Because, as I say, and I want to repeat this, these countries have been assisting Ukraine in more ways than one, not only in terms of military equipment, but also money, loans, intelligence provision, logistical support, and a plethora of other things. And they were unable to protect Ukraine. The plan was for Russia to implode, to fall apart, to not have a protracted war. All of their plans have not succeeded. And so the question that Zelensky must ask, give me guarantees that my people will be safe, that the death toll of our soldiers are not going to remain so high, and that we are going to be able to push Putin back. If you can't give us those guarantees, then what are you demanding? Because Putin is very clear. His generals around him are saying, we are making advances on the battlefield. We've extended the line of the battlefield now. We are getting closer to Kyiv. And soon, with the continuous pummeling and the continuous forward movement of the Russians, Ukraine is going to leave much more than the current 20%. Trump is going to say, lose the 20%, take the deal, because people are dying weekly, as he has indicated, and you are not able to stop the Russians.
So that's the tactic that Zelensky needs to use, and perhaps, they speak amongst themselves with the leaders that are going to be flanking him in the Oval Office. If we go to the other side of the issue here, and you go, what is Trump doing at this moment to prepare himself from the meeting, and the kind of temperature that we expect? And the reason why I even mentioned Vice President J.D. Vance, I mean, the last time Zelensky was in that office, there was a serious show of force and power between the two leaders of the U.S. Do you think that we could see more of those dramatics and how they prepare for that?
I think not. I think they're not going to go for the dramatics unless Zelensky is going to be overtly arrogant, and then they will be put in his place. But I suspect, Trump is also being disingenuous. I think the point must be made. When Trump says that, Zelensky will have to decide and the Europeans will have to decide, this is not really my call. It's absolute nonsense. Trump is the one that is completely central, and the United States, without the United States and the support, the weapons, the money, etc., the Europeans, even though they give this impression that they can do it without America, they can't. They need America. They need weapons from America. They need logistical and intelligence support from the Americans, etc. So it's not true that Trump can't do anything. The grand plan here, Naledi, is that J.D. Vance, Herksev, and everyone around Trump, and Trump knows this, they need to pivot to the east. The big enemy is China. They need to pick a fight with China. And so they want to get themselves out of the Ukrainian mess and say to the Europeans, you deal with Russia and the Ukraine matter. Of course, you can purchase weapons from us because remember, it's all about the military industrial complex and they need to make their profits. This is why there's this forever wars that they love, and they're picking the next fight with China. So this is what they are going to want. Israel, you keep Iran in check, and we will support you with weapons and logistics as we always have. Europe, you tackle Russia and keep him busy, keep Putin busy. We will concentrate on China. This is the grand plan.
Yeah, I was actually going to sit with it a little bit, and if you'll indulge me, because you talk about, that bigger plan, right? The focus on China and also Russia. If you start to go even more of a bird's eye view, the argument, I think it was the UN Secretary General, Guterres, who talked about the multipolarity world that we're moving into. And so what those power dynamics look like when you do have, for instance, a Trump that says, well, we are going to go in and back Ukraine and offer NATO-like protection to Ukraine, right? What that does to that polarity economically as well, you've got that tension with BRICS, if you take it there as well.
Yeah, no, so this is just, as I started saying, the big winner is the battlefield realities. This is all just big talk by the Europeans and by Trump. If they could have done any damage to Putin and the Russian armed forces, they would have done it by now. They have not been able to. So, stop the bravado. Stop. What I would want to say about tomorrow's meeting is that everyone in the room needs to be honest. You need honesty in the room, and you need to face the realities. And the realities are, if we are going to say, okay, Europe, you continue the war, you support Ukraine to the hilt, financially and otherwise, then let that be the plan. Let's not then fool ourselves and say we want peace and we want, because it's not true. At the moment, the only reason why they want a ceasefire is because they are losing on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And Russia is not going to agree. So already I can tell you, nothing concrete is going to come out of tomorrow's meeting. If Zelensky and the Europeans stick to their guns and say we can't be defeated by Putin, then it means that the war itself is going to resolve the matter. And that means that Russia is going to take over the whole of Ukraine, put in their own puppet in Kyiv, and then make sure that it is never going to join NATO. It will remain a neutral state. The Donbas regions will now be part of Russia, etc., etc.
Yeah, I think I'm going to squeeze one last question in, but this is just for our own interest here in South Africa. What, for the interest of South Africa, I don't know if you can even answer the question, the ideal outcomes for South Africa, or what South Africa is watching for in that sitting tomorrow with Trump, Zelensky, and those European leaders?
Peace. The reason why Ramaphosa led a African presidential delegation to Ukraine and to Russia was to say we need peace. These things are affecting global issues and affecting Africa in particular, in terms of food security, in terms of gas and oil prices. It is already beginning to have a negative impact. The sooner the war can end, the better the global south and Africa in particular is going to come out of this. And so the interest for Ramaphosa and for the continent is that hopefully cooler heads will prevail in Washington tomorrow, and they will come up with a genuine peace agreement going forward.
Yeah. Dr. Oscar Van Heerden, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. He is, of course, an international relations expert, and we'll be keeping a close eye on that meeting in the Oval Office tomorrow with Trump, Zelensky, and European leaders there to support the Ukrainian president.